Good evening and welcome to Nuuspod, our virtual studio. And we have in the studio tonight Dr. Pieter Groenewald. He is the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. Good evening, Pieter.
Good evening, Isak and the other participants.
And then also Thomas Walters. He's the deputy chair of the DA's Federal Council. Am I right about that, Thomas?
Yes, you're correct, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks for the invite.
I always get the two a bit on the wrong side. Then Herman Mashaba, leader of ActionSA. Good evening, Herman. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Isak, and thanks for putting this together. And good evening to the other participants and the listeners out there.
And the reason I'm talking to you in my best Free State English is for the course of Herman. Herman, thank you very much for joining us, and we will be conducting this interview in English, although I must tell you that I really only speak Free State English, and anyone that expects more from me must put this off now and go and listen to something else. But coalitions are at the order of the day. It's becoming more and more important in the South African landscape, political landscape. It's a debate that's been going on, still going on, a debate that's very, very important if you look at what is happening in South African politics at the moment. But although it is such an important issue, it seems that political parties, that is you guys that are sitting there, seems sometimes to mix this up and don't get it right all the time. So I want to hear from you tonight. How do you see the future of coalitions in South Africa on the way to 2024? Herman, let me start with you. I know the DA will tell us that you don't have a national presence yet, and therefore you are not so much important for this conversation. But I think you are, because all signs are there that you're going to play at least an important role come 2024. And therefore, let us start with you. How do you see the future of coalitions in South Africa?
Well, let me start first. First of all, Isak, thank you very much for really organizing this platform, and also to really help our friends in the DA to really accept that ActionSA come 2024 is going to emerge much bigger than the DA. And we just have to really wait 2 years. So we don't have to really wait too long. So for them to really be under the impression that ActionSA does not have national footprint, I don't know where they live. They don't probably live in the same country as I do. But I think let's really get to the meat of your request for the discussions. Any political party in this country that is going to not accept and embrace coalition arrangement, that party does not really deserve to be in a political field, because unfortunately the voters of this country, whether we like it or not as politicians, they've made up their minds. They are no longer prepared to really be governed by one political party. They've had 28 years of hell of the ANC, and they've decided they are no longer going to give one political party the mandate to govern. And so anyone who's not ready to embrace this, that political party then does not really deserve to really be in politics, because we are all in politics to be in government, because when you're in government, that's the only way you can actually make the difference to the lives of our people. I can speak for myself. I'm not in politics to be in opposition. I'm in politics to be in government. And to be in government, that means we've got to first remove the ANC and really form coalition or multi-party government with those who are willing to embrace the electoral outcomes of what the voters have wanted.
Thomas Walters, I know the DA have been working hard now in Nelson Mandela Bay, especially trying to get that coalition going again. Just your views for the start of the conversation on the future?
Well, let me first say I said nothing about ActionSA, Isak. I think you were the one who made the remark that Mr. Mashaba responded to.
I'm sorry, it wasn't you, but it was someone from the DA that sent me such a message.
Oh, well, look, it's. I think the focus, of course, of this discussion is coalition politics. First of all, the important thing is that the ANC is, in a sense, the last apartheid institution. It's an institution that developed in the context of apartheid. It developed as in opposition to apartheid, but in a sense, it still represents politics of 25, 30 years ago. And if you look at some of the economic policies 50 years ago, it's failing, it's busy falling apart. So we are in South Africa facing a new transition. There's a new environment where one can even argue that our politics are starting to normalize. We are not captured by the mental constructs of the past. Increasingly, people are more free to vote. And I think it's not just the DA, but all opposition parties that benefit from, call it the liberation of people from the ANC and the past. And that this is what we are seeing. Political parties, coalitions are, provided those coalitions support the Constitution, provided those coalitions result in real better government, those coalitions are obviously the future of South Africa. The DA feels it's very strong that we play as a big party, that we play an anchor point, act as an anchor for those coalitions. But that is not to say that other parties that we don't want to cooperate. In fact, we are cooperating very well. We actually, despite some of the drama, think the coalition governments in South Africa are doing well. And what you would see in the case of Nelson Mandela, there is a very, very critical water shortage, apart from all the other service delivery problems that this particular metro faces. There is a real crisis. Now, while the coalition, it's a minority coalition, of course, it's vulnerable politically. The DA, really in the interest of saving that metro from complete collapse, we engaged with some difficult talks, but we are now poised to take with other coalition parties, take Nelson Mandela Metro over and turn it into a coalition government, sort out the water crisis, sort out the corruption, sort out the service delivery problem. So we're absolutely determined that there's a turnaround in Nelson Mandela, and frankly, all the coalition governments where we are, the senior partner. Thanks.
Pieter, your turn.
Well, Isak, your question is, what is the future of coalitions? The answer to that is that coalitions are the future to save South Africa. And the reason I say that is that we must ensure that we get rid of an ANC government in 2024. And there is only one way. We can get rid of the ANC, and that is by means of opposition parties forming a coalition. And the reason I say that is there is no single political party in South Africa who on its own will be able to get more than 50% support in a 2024 election. Therefore, it is essential that we have coalitions. Now, a coalition government is something new for the electorate and the people of South Africa. But we must also say, if you look, for instance, in the world, coalition governments are not something new. In fact, if you go to Germany and you look at those coalitions there, they are very strong when it comes to coalitions. Yes, and it is also true, coalitions are vulnerable. And Thomas just referred to the Nelson Mandela Bay. I think it's a very vulnerable coalition, but we have a task, and that's part of the future of coalitions, to say to the electorate of South Africa, it is possible that coalition governments can be formed in South Africa, that different political parties, although they have differences in terms of certain policies, certain ideologies, that they can still work together. And one of the best things and a favorable issue about coalitions is that when you form a coalition government, certain ideology and certain well, I wouldn't say principles, but certain policies of political parties will have to be in the background, and you have to compromise. And that compromise is to ensure what is in the best interest of the electorate. So I see that element in coalitions, that it is favorable to the people, to the electorate, because now different political parties must focus and concentrate on those issues that is important to ensure that there is better and best service delivery to the people, and not necessarily what's in the best interest of a specific political party.
Okay. In the best interest of the electorate, you said it, Pieter, you said it, Thomas, you said it, Herman, but now it is a fact that all three of these parties and the other parties being part of coalition forming have a different view on what is best for the electorate. How do you overcome that, Herman?
I think, Isaac, one thing that we must never be really fool ourselves and be naive that life is easy. I think to be put in a coalition arrangement, it's a difficult arrangement. I can tell you, running government, I've never obviously run government having outright majority. Even that alone would really be difficult. Now you can imagine if you have to run a coalition arrangement, it is going to be much more difficult. But at the end of the day, let us accept it as South Africans. We are already under siege of the ANC. We've had 28 years of hell, actual hell. And I'd rather really deal with the complexities of a coalition arrangement and we remove the ANC than actually saying, you know what, coalitions are difficult. Coalitions are difficult by their nature, and it's nothing unique to South Africa. They are difficult all over the world. For us as ActionSA, we are saying we'd rather be in a coalition arrangement without the ANC and we move them out because we've got experience of their brutality towards this country, because ANC is not there here to serve. So we embrace anyone who wants to really work with us. But once we are in a coalition arrangement, one thing that we must understand, the arrogance cannot really be the order of the day. We cannot really have a situation where you want to really run a coalition arrangement as if you've got a two-thirds majority. When you run a coalition arrangement, embrace all the parties, whether they bring one vote, 1% or 15% or 20%, treat them all equally with respect. Once you really bring the arrogance and thinking that you've got better values and principles than the others, unfortunately, you are putting the coalition arrangement into a risk. And I've had a privilege for 3 years to run a complex coalition arrangement in the city of Johannesburg with no knowledge of how government works. And you know how our coalition arrangement was successful in Johannesburg? Because I treated all the parties the same. Unfortunately, the only difficult partner in this arrangement was my own party that I represented. That's why, unfortunately, it ended up with me having to leave 2 years ahead of the next election, which was really quite sad. But fortunately enough, you know what? It gave birth to ActionSA. And as ActionSA, we're proud for having now put a multi-party government into power in Johannesburg. Because if ActionSA did not intervene, the city of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane today would be under ANC government. On the morning of council, that's when I said, I'm not going to allow this. I've got nothing to lose. Let me talk to all the other parties. Let's vote the DA into power and we talk to them afterwards. Whatever outcome, as long as we've got this corrupt thugs called ANC out of government. And we succeeded in achieving this. And we are proud about that. And we will continue every opportunity to constitutionally remove the ANC out of power. We're going to do that.
Okay, just before I go to you, Thomas, I just want to let you guys know that at any time you are welcome to comment. You don't have to wait for me to give you a turn. This is a conversation, so please feel free and just indicate when you want to say something. Thomas, I don't want to put words into Herman's mouth, but I think I've read that somewhere at least. And it was it was meant to go into the direction of the DA, if I'm not wrong, the arrogant part and the bigger party part. Do you want to comment, not necessarily in a defensive way, but just there is the perception.
No, Isak, I mean, I'm definitely not on the defensive here. Mr. Mashaba refers to an attempt to force the DA into a voting arrangement with the EFF prior to the negotiations started. The idea at the time that Mr. Mashaba had was that opposition parties should support him as the mayor. Part of the argument at the time was that he can bring the votes of the EFF into that arrangement. The DA is not willing to form a coalition agreement or any voting arrangement with the EFF. And before Mr. Mashaba accuses me of putting words into his mouth, 23 November 2021, Mr. Mashaba is on record as saying that he will not come to the negotiation table unless the EFF is there. Subsequently attempted in the negotiations to have the EFF included in either a coalition arrangement or in a voting arrangement into the coalition. And recently we saw similar attempts out in Kwadakuza as well, out in KZN. So Mr. Mashaba should not confuse the DA not feeling that the EFF is a reliable partner to build a constitutional democracy with arrogance. Anything but. We think it's common sense. It's not just about removing the ANC, but replacing the DA with good value-based coalition arrangements. Of course, all parties have something to contribute. No political party has a monopoly on the truth. We absolutely agree that, in fact, coalition governments is the natural phenomena in South Africa. It's how I think it's a phenomenon that in the future, if we can make coalition governments work, it will allow the diversity of opinions, cultures, different values of parties to be expressed. But there's a big difference between forming a coalition and fundamentally working with political parties that are anathema to the values not just of the DA but the Constitution of South Africa. It's not pragmatic. In fact, it's highly pragmatic to exclude such parties from a coalition setting, because we're dealing with a party that wants to destabilize the very constitutional democracy of South Africa and will use every single opportunity in relation with the coalition or with the ANC to advance their own agenda. That is our firm belief. But Isak, I also I'm very happy to proceed with the to and fro between myself and Mashaba. I want to point out that the coalitions that all these parties are part of are in fact being, much as there's a bit of drama and there's a bit of arm wrestle that I think sometimes people that are not used to a coalition environment, they find upsetting. The fact of the matter is budgets got passed. Fact of the matter is the government is functioning. Fact of the matter is our with the one exception where we were in a minority government, committee chairs are being passed, governments are being formed, already coalitions, and with the involvement of all the parties here, is in fact working better than what we've seen with the ANC. And while I do agree with Mr. Mashaba, the ANC must fall. They are the obstacle towards service delivery, a functional constitutional democracy. They are the core reason why South Africa is struggling, and I believe coalition governments will change that. Thanks.
Ek gaan gou vir Pieter 'n kans gee. Pieter, you indicated that you want to say something.
Thank you, Isak. Well, let's come back to your question. Your question was, how do we deal with different ideologies of the different coalition parties? The simple answer is that you get an agreement amongst those different political parties. It is a coalition agreement. It is on paper. You set out the rules in that agreement. You, for instance, put out the policy. Each and every coalition party will enhance. For instance, part of that agreement is that if we put certain people in some executive position, he or she must be qualified and fit for purpose on that specific position. And yes, different political parties have different views, but we all agree that, for instance, that merit should be the criteria. We're not going into affirmative action and all that sort of things. Let's get the best people to do the job. But now we must also say to each other that the media must also play their part to enhance coalition government for 2024, and that is that part of the agreement is that you do not refer, for instance, to a DA-led coalition. There's no such coalition. It is a coalition government that is in, for instance, in Johannesburg and Tshwane and the other municipalities or metros where there is a coalition government. So the moment you start with, and that is the media. I know, for instance, that there were certain cases where the DA interfered, or not interfered, but they stepped in and said to certain journalists and some of their own supporters and their own councillors, do not refer to a DA-led government or a DA-led coalition in Johannesburg or wherever. Specifically where you have minority coalition governments. But the most important is that you must have a solid agreement amongst the coalition governments. And that was part of the problem if we go back to 2016, where there was a coalition in Nelson Mandela Bay, but it was not successful because, as far as I'm concerned, there was not a proper and a detailed agreement amongst the coalition partners. So that takes quite a lot of time of each and every political party. And it is not a matter you put it once. There, of course, will be a situation where different issues arises during this governing period. And therefore, at this moment, we have different solutions to the problem by means of different committees, meetings that can take place, for instance, on the caucus level, up even to, like we call, the coalition organizational government, where all the party political leaders come together to solve a problem.
Pieter, ek wil gou graag vir Thomas 'n kans gee. Thomas, you want to say something?
Ja, ek dink Piet, ekskuus, ek het nou Afrikaans oorgeslaan. I think Peter is he's referring to I think a very important phenomenon. And places like Germany, Netherlands, certainly systems, particularly in Europe, where you have coalition governments that are also proportional systems such as ours. It takes sometimes months to negotiate coalition agreements, and it's because it's in a sense been accepted and have become part of the political tradition in those countries where it's not seen as a strange thing for political parties to really negotiate detailed agreements. And then, of course, the public also expects people to hold to those agreements. The parties hold one another accountable. As Mr. Groenewald has pointed out, or Dr. Groenewald has pointed out, I don't believe the coalition agreements, and it's been publicized as well. There's a huge confusion in values that the party share. You know, we don't believe in race-based politics as a coalition. The DA can certainly live with that. We believe in excellence. We believe in service delivery. We believe in market-orientated principles. We believe in meaningful interventions driven by sustainability to include the majority of South Africans into the benefits of government, which is something all the parties can agree to. And to me, the key point is, and when Mr. Groenewald is referring where the media can certainly play a role, is to make people, or help us, make is the wrong word, but help us to communicate to South Africans. It's not strange. This is, the country is not, or municipalities are not in any form of crisis, so it's not unstable because there's a coalition government. If anything, it's stabilizing. If anything, there's more ideas, more diversity of opinions being introduced, and we think it's a step forward for South Africa.
Amen.
Thanks.
Isaac, I think I just really want to really correct really something here from Thomas. I think it's really very important for your listeners in South Africa in particular, because coalition arrangement and all of us being in politics, we are here to save our country. We are here to unseat the ANC. They've made us suffer almost irreparable damage. But I think coalition arrangements like be marriage or a business arrangement, if there's no integrity, there's no truth, where people are unable to differentiate between truth and lie, it's a problem for me. Unfortunately, that's how I operate. I think for Thomas and the DA to paint me as if to give you an example, I'm the one who put together the coalition arrangement in 2016 with the support of the EFF. I was never even consulted. I just want to remind your listeners and you and DA, EFF actually had a press conference in Alexander, claiming that there's a small issue. They are prepared to accept the DA, but there's a small issue. How I came to know about this? When Tsidi Madia at the time with News 24 phoning me. Immediately after that, I got phoned by Stephen Grotes, who says, have you watched the EFF conference? Do you know what the problem is? I had no idea what was happening. The DA was going to have a press conference the very same afternoon in Sandton. No one from the DA never took me into confidence. As their mayor, I left my business because I wanted to work with the DA to remove the ANC.
Pieter, ek gaan nou na jou toe kom.
Media.
Ek gaan nou na jou toe kom.
Let me also tell you something really very fundamental.
Yes.
About really what transpired. Now, for them to really paint me as if I'm the one working with the EFF. You know how I knew that there was a written agreement? It was the Freedom Front Plus that brought this to my attention almost 3 months into this, because the DA insisted on us calling this DA administration. And one day, the Freedom Front Plus person said, no, we've got an agreement. And I said, where's this agreement? He says, I will send it to you. I got to know about the existence of a written coalition arrangement from the Freedom Front Plus, not for the DA. You can imagine I'm the mayor of the majority party. That was never brought to my attention. That's what I'm talking about, the arrogance of not really respecting other parties. So my sin with the EFF is because I respected the EFF like I respected the Freedom Front Plus, ACDP, all the other parties, because it was important for me to really be able to pass my budget. I get everybody on board. But DA said, no, I must not talk to the EFF. But I do not understand. If you look at the numbers at the time, the SDA, we had 38%. Without the EFF's support, there was no way that you could get pass your budget, and was to just consult with them. And I've never consulted with the EFF behind the back of anyone. I discussed with them all the time. I'll have partners with me. I will inform the DA about this. Let me give you another example. In the Kuruleni, remember, beginning of this year, I raised the question about the coalition arrangement in Kuruleni. I said, how are we going to pass budget when we don't have majority? And the DA said, we will see to it. Thomas, I want you to share with South Africans your negotiations in writing with the EFF. You are saying to South Africans that you're not negotiating with the EFF. I'm sure you are aware that you are talking to the EFF, and I don't think you'd expect me. I can prove to you in writing that you are negotiating with the EFF to really support you. Thirdly, also very important, your national chairperson, beginning of this year, sending a WhatsApp message to our national chairperson that we as ActionSA must help us negotiate to get the EFF on board. So I find this whole the issue really very disturbing. But however, I'm saying to South Africans and the DA, we are committed to working with you, whether you lie to us or not. We are not going to drop you. You are going to govern for the next 5 years. We're going to make sure that we give you the support, because there's no way that we are going to allow ANC to come back into this municipalities.
Thomas, ek gaan gou vir jou kans gee om te reageer. Ek sien jy het jou hand opgesteek.
I'm not 100% sure what Mr. Mashaba is talking about. Fact of the matter is, I served on the federal executive of the party now for many years. If there was any conversation that Mr. Mashaba is pulling out of the air here, most certainly there was no political mandate at all for people to negotiate with the EFF. The one instance that I could make out there refers to a follow-up where ActionSA, in fact, were bringing at our negotiations a viewpoint via themselves from the EFF. And there's a big difference between talking to parties ahead of a vote, asking them whether they're going to be voting for an item, which is done in a coalition setting. It's not just the DA, and the DA sanctioning negotiations with the EFF. But I'm not 100% sure what Mr. Mashaba is referring to. I also don't think this is about Mr. Mashaba. This is not about his personal experience or whether he's angry at the DA for some past fight that he had in his caucus. This is about building coalitions going forward into the future. So we're perfectly happy to, agree to disagree on matters of the past and look forward. And I think Mr. Mashaba should let go. It's not about him. It's about the future of our country.
I want to go to Pieter quickly.
Thank you, Isak. You say quickly, but give me a...
No, that's fine.
No, let me first say this. I think we have just heard the complexity when it comes to coalition talks and coalition partners and everything. But let me try to get some clarity on the table as far as the EFF is concerned. I mean, the Freedom Front Plus said it throughout the election, we will not go in any coalition in terms of the ANC or the EFF. The DA said exactly that same. And Mr. Herman Mashaba, he is on record where he said that he is not willing to go in any coalition with any political party that is part of corruption. He said that. Now, the fact of the matter is as follows. It has been agreed on the coalition partners, specifically when it comes to Ekurhuleni, and where we have the same situation now in Nelson Mandela Bay, where the EFF actually is the decisive vote, because the coalition partners, we are a minority government. But now, we agreed that the EFF will not be part of the coalition agreement. Now we must get to the practical situation. And I think Thomas referred to that just now, that when you have to pass a budget, for instance, then of course, councillors who are there in that specific metro or municipality, they will talk, for instance, to the EFF, because we don't know always what is the situation between the EFF and the ANC. And if I can put it in Afrikaans, ek wil sê die EFF en die ANC is soos die katfamilie. Jy weet nie altyd of hulle beklei en of hulle vry nie. So what I'm saying is that they are not reliable in the first instance. On an ideological basis, there is no way that, for instance, from the Freedom Front Plus, that we will find each other as formal, official coalition partners. So that is the situation, and that is the complexity of a coalition government. But let me say this, that at this moment it's going well, and where the EFF, for instance, did play a role, if I can go back to Ekurhuleni, is that we agreed, because the view from the Freedom Front Plus is that we don't want to be part of a minority coalition government, except if there is special circumstances. And in Ekurhuleni, for instance, we said we're not going to be part of the executive or the mayoral committee, but we are willing to take positions as chairs of Section 79 committees, which that was the agreement. But then the EFF came forward, and because they have the final decision, they didn't give any chair of Section 79 committees to the Freedom Front Plus. But so be it. We continue. We are not throwing our toys out of the cot. We continue because the one golden rule is what is in the best interest of the taxpayers, the people, and that we must always comply to.
And with that being said, let me ask the following question to you as party leaders. Because you're sitting here, you are telling us that it's that you want to serve the best interest of the electorate. But when we listen to you, like tonight, we hear small stuff bickering. We hear the ActionSA being in a brawl. We hear the DA saying that ActionSA wants cadre deployment and all other sorts of accusations being made. How do you want the electorate to trust what you are saying? How do you want us to go to 2024? Because that's all. Everyone that's sitting here has a dream that the useless ANC must go down now. We can't afford another day of this freaking ANC governing us. But you guys are battling to make us trust you.
Now, Isaac, we're not battling. We're doing what is right for the voters out there. Because for us as ActionSA, we want to make it really very clear. We are not in this government because we are friends with the DA. We've got nothing to do with friendship. We are here to serve South Africa. We are here with the DA to ensure that ANC is not back in government. That's really one thing that we as ActionSA, we want to live with that conscience. People must never want to really associate us with the DA. We're not we're a totally independent political party, supporting the DA to govern so that we do not allow the ANC to really be in government. And we will hold the DA accountable as much as we support them. But at the end of the day, where we don't agree with them, we are not going to play games with them. I mean, I can give you an example. Right now, we've got a huge issue in the city of Tshwane with the Hammanskraal water treatment, Rooiwal water treatment plant, where a company owned by Saudi, the Blackhead Consulting, why this company was given this tender. We are going to hold them accountable. We are in government with them, but we are going to hold them accountable. That does not really mean that we're going to remove them from power. As I've indicated earlier, we will keep the ANC, the DA in power until such time that we get to the next government. We will protect them to ensure that ANC does not come back into office. Because the mistake that we can make, it actually would really be fooling the voters out there. If we can give them an impression, allow ourselves where we see wrong, we don't obviously bring it forward because we're in coalition arrangement. For us as ActionSA, we want South Africans to know that we are going to hold the DA or anyone else, and we want the DA also to hold us accountable. It's not a one-way stream. So basically, it doesn't really mean that if DA feels that they've got anything against us, they're most welcome. But because we are going to do the same thing. But that does not really mean that this is an abnormal situation. Actually, that is the beauty of coalition arrangement, because you know what? We can hold one another accountable for the interest of the voters and the people of South Africa.
Thomas?
Look, let me just say the only problem that the DA has with Mr. Mashaba is that he handed Johannesburg to the ANC when he resigned because of an internal election contest that he didn't like the result of. We don't otherwise have a problem with Mr. Mashaba. And I don't believe this. In fact, I think part of the problem is that this type of conversation leaves the impression that there's a big problem between ActionSA and the DA, and that the DA and ActionSA are, in conflict with one another. The experience, Mr. Mashaba made reference to Tshwane and Johannesburg, and the three, I think there's 3 municipalities where the ActionSA as a footprint. It is, I happen to think with the bumps and disagreements, I happen to think it's all been in a vein where ultimately the voters won. In fact, the issues that he mentioned, all of those things have been scrutinized at a local level in the coalition management group. That's part of the coalition agreement. I think that the difficulty, the big threat to coalitions are when personalities project themselves into what is in fact painstaking interaction based on constant engagement with people in government and people in the respective caucuses. That it's hard work. It's not work that's done on Twitter. It's work that it's every single day. Public representatives of all these parties. Just earlier this week, they concluded a meeting in Tshwane at 11 o'clock at night. People are working very hard to actually find one another. Mostly they find one another. In fact, in most of the cases, they found one another. And I don't want the impression be created that there's some kind of a instability. I think Mr. Mashaba is maybe, as I said, he must let go of some of his personal issues. I don't think it reflects the reality of the relationships between the various parties. And I can also tell you what Mr. Mashaba is trying to do is by fighting with me on this platform and fighting with the DA publicly, he's trying to get publicity for himself. We're not going to indulge that. Let's work on these coalitions. In fact, let's sell these coalitions positively together. It doesn't have to be this type of puerile interaction. I really think we should focus on selling the future of the future governance.
Herman, I just want to go to Pieter. He already indicated that he wanted to say something.
Thank you, Isak. Isak, I think we must just get the correct perspective here. And the viewers and the listeners and the electors must understand one thing. It doesn't mean that when different political parties, if they are partners in a coalition, that they do not criticize each other. I mean, we are having a couple of by-elections coming Wednesday, the 3rd of August. Let's take Tshwane. The Freedom Front Plus is in a coalition with the DA, ActionSA, and other political parties in Tshwane. But in the by-election and in the whole campaign to this by-election, the Freedom Front Plus, for instance, criticized the DA on certain policy issues, the party as such. The DA criticized the Freedom Front Plus on certain issues as far as the policies are concerned. So that's normal politics.
That I understand, Pieter. That I understand. But in all honesty, forgive me for saying that, but that is the perception that exists with voters. Is that there's personal bickering, especially between ActionSA and the DA, that is wat is die woord vir verlammend nou skielik in Engels? Nou ek kan nie nou dink nie.
Sê dit in Afrikaans.
Dit het 'n verlammende effek op hierdie koalisie talks. It's paralyzing
Okay.
the whole process.
Okay, what you actually say, it seems it's on personal level, and that's detrimental to the coalition agreement. Now, firstly, it's not correct. Yes, it's not what we want. And we say to all coalition parties, don't get personal. But, okay, if something like that happens, you must always have the final test to see whether it had a breakup in the coalition as such. And what we are doing, if there are situations like you're referring now on personal, can I say, remarks amongst different political parties. Say, for instance, I might now start making a personal remark about John Steenhuisen and John Steenhuisen towards me. Of course, you will react in public, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the coalition is going to break up. That's why we have different, can I say, committees. There are different, can I say, mechanisms in the coalition agreement where we can then deal with that. Say, for instance, I say something negative towards John Steenhuisen tonight. Then, of course, if he does not react tomorrow, then there's something wrong, and vice versa. But that doesn't mean that we're going to withdraw and pull out of the coalition. So people must understand that politics is quite complex. And if you have coalition governments, it's even more complex. But the golden rule, and I've said it a couple of times this evening, the golden rule is, what does the agreement say? And if it happens that one of the coalition parties, because of personal differences or whatever, break down the coalition, then I'm going to ask the voters to deal with that specific political party and the political party leader, because that is then not in the interest of the electorate in South Africa.
Amen.
Isaac, I think let's just really be clear and honest with the voters out there. This country means a lot to all of us, me in particular. One thing I can commit ActionSA to the removal of ANC, and in the meantime, in this three municipalities where we govern with the DA, we're going to govern with them. We will do everything possible to protect them. But let me be honest with your listeners out there. Personally, I don't trust the DA. They've betrayed me so many times. The DA, what they tell you and what they do, so many times that I think really, for me, the DA, as far as I'm concerned, they're habitual liars, and I'm prepared to live with it. That when I deal with the DA, what they tell me and what they're going to do, I've accepted it. But they're a better devil than the ANC, to have the ANC in government.
Thomas,
No, look, I'm not going to get into that with Mr. Mashaba. I think I said what I wanted to say. I would like to talk about the way that the DA sees the future, and we are very proud of the fact that the party has a record of a very proud record for many years, trying to build a constitutional South Africa. You will recall, and we committed, you don't go from a party of 1.7% of the vote to where we are today without a fundamental belief in the future of this country and the future of constitutional democracy. Our constitution was designed to get a multiplicity of voices into the system. And within that framework, the DA, we see ourselves as a natural partner with enormous capacity and governance experience, successful governance experience behind us, to form a backbone of exactly that model of government, which we can take to certainly in Gauteng, it's in the mix in the next election, possibly even national government. We sincerely hope so and are working very hard towards that objective. And yes, I think at the end of the day, I've been in politics for many, many years. I think, yes, we can disagree publicly with one another. There's nothing wrong with it. But at the end of the day, let's leave the personality, the disputes and the whodunits, who hurt who out of it. Let's focus on the future. Thanks.
Pieter, I want to go to you. Sorry, now I'm also speaking Afrikaans. Pieter, I want to come to you. I remember at one stage the DA criticized smaller parties for actually breaking down the system and causing the DA not to take over from the ANC. I think that's a point that has been put aside since then, and the Freedom Front Plus gaining some remarkable gains, making some remarkable gains in the past two municipal elections, especially, and in a national election. And now I see that Helen Zille is making a point on Facebook about 2024 regarding independent candidates. Let's talk a little bit about that issue regarding the future of coalitions.
I think it's a very good example you're using, Isak. And yes, I said that we may have our campaigns and where we criticize each other. And referring specifically to that, the reality has proved the difference, because the Freedom Front Plus has always said that each and every vote counts in South Africa. We have a proportional electoral system, and that in simple terms being, if a political party gets 10% of the votes, that party will get 10% of the seats in the National Assembly. And we're coming a long way. The DA started it with that slogan, don't waste a vote on smaller parties like the Freedom Front, since 2004. In 2019, the people start realizing and understand how the electoral system works. Now, the fact of the matter is that is part of coalition government. We've always said that one of the strong features of a proportional electoral system is that it ensures that there are coalition governments in future. And that is what is happening now. So the Freedom Front Plus, and it's not that I want to have little fights with the DA or anything. In practice, reality now has proved the Freedom Front Plus correct. And I mean, if you go to the DA is the official opposition. Before 2019, they had about 23% of the vote. So you had an official opposition of 23%. They now have 20%, but the 3% were made up by other political parties. So it did not favor the ANC, and the people must understand the electoral system. But what is important is, I mean, the Freedom Front Plus is now part of the big five political parties in South Africa. We can bring our values and our views into a coalition. And we know that there will be some other compromise. And that's what makes coalitions such a challenge, to ensure that besides our certain differences, let's see what is the best workable solution for the people. And therefore, yes, coming 2024, we will see that the different political parties who are part of coalitions will criticize each other. But they must remember that doesn't mean that the coalition will break up. I mean, that's all over the world like that. And I can make a simple example, for instance, if a family walks into a supermarket and there's some quarrel between the husband and the wife, it doesn't mean they're going to divorce the next morning. Yes, they have their differences, but there are ways to solve those differences. And that is my answer to your question on that. So I can't now raise my chin and say, we've told you so. Every
we don't have much time left anymore. Herman, I'm going to give you a last word and then go to Thomas. What can you promise South Africans, South African voters, on the way to 2024? Give us some hope, man.
Well, I can really give South Africans hope that at least for the first time, there's a political party out there that is not only committed to unseating the ANC, but capable. So people of South Africa can really be assured that come 2024, a multi-party government is going to be formed in this country, and that multi-party government is not going to include the ANC. And I'm working hard on this. As I'm talking to you right now, Isaac, I'm in Nelspruit. Tomorrow I'm announcing our provincial chairperson for this particular province. By end of this year, ActionSA will be represented throughout the country. I heard Dr. Groenewald earlier on talking about being the fifth biggest political party. Look at ActionSA, only just over a year old party, but we are the sixth. We contested in 6 municipalities out of 278. But ActionSA is the sixth biggest political party in this country. So anyone who's under illusion that ActionSA is not represented nationally, wait for 2024. We are going to be part of that government, and that government is not going to include the ANC.
Thomas?
Net om saam te vat. Ekskuus, weer ingespring daarso. Isaac, laat ek net vir jou sê dat die voorbeeld wat Dr. Groenewald gebruik het van 'n man en sy vrou wat beklei, en ek wil net sê ek verloor elke onderhandeling met my vrou. So ek is 'n bietjie skrikkerig vir daai voorbeeld. Look, the DA, we have restructured, reorganized our party. Our polling indicates that we are growing. We see ourselves as a responsible anchor point for good governance, a responsible anchor point for the Constitution of South Africa, to make our country the success story that we can be. One of the big tragedies and one of the reasons I'm in politics is, frankly, the dream of what we could have been and what we are is not the same thing. And that is something that the DA and the DA politicians have dedicated their lives to. And we believe that, yes, that there's a certain maturity in politics that should be built. We should start preparing coalition agreements going into the future. We might differ on, this and that between parties, but I think parties like ActionSA, the DA and the Freedom Front, there are certain core values that we share. And I believe that South Africans, yes, there are bad things happening in South Africa, but let's not miss the good things that are happening in South Africa, and coalition governments in which the DA is throwing its full weight behind. That's one of the good things that we should, South Africans should realize.
Dr. Pieter Groenewald?
Thank you, Isaac. I suppose this is the closing remarks. You ask, give us some hope. There is hope for 2024. And that hope lies firstly that I do think that ActionSA is going to play a vital role because they have the ability to take the voters from the ANC even the DA still must do everything they can to take the voters away from the ANC. And we are committed. We say that we're going to do our best to get the voters to vote. But in that part, to give hope for 2024, the political parties have to play their part, and we committed ourselves, we will. But the voters of South Africa is part of creating hope for 2024. And the reason I say that, at this moment, the ANC governs with a 58% majority in the National Assembly, but they only received 27% of eligible voters in South Africa. The voters stay away from politics. They always say, I'm finished with politics. The fact is, politics is never finished with you. And I appeal to the voters, register and ensure that you vote in 2024, because that will give hope that we will be able to get the ANC out of government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Herman Mashaba, Thomas Walters, and Dr. Pieter Groenewald. I must just give you a message before I let you go. I believe that you work very hard. I can see it because I read the papers every day. I speak to politicians every day of my life. So I can see the parties are really working hard. But maybe it's time that you guys also listen to the voters, because the voters say something different than what you are telling me tonight. If you read the column next to me of the people commenting on what we are discussing here, if you read what the people are commenting every day when I have my live morning program, they don't see it as you see. They see parties building their own parties, not the interest of the electorate. So can you go home with that message and go and listen to the voters, please? Have a good night. Thank you very much for honoring me with your presence. Herman, I will see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, good night then. En baie dankie aan almal wat saam gekyk het en saam geluister het. Hierdie opname sal dan nou beskikbaar wees op YouTube.
Baie dankie.